So we've got a lot to get to on the show today, and I do want to start with COVID-19 because we had some breaking news just a short time ago on the coronavirus front. This is some good news because Pfizer, just a few moments ago, saying that their COVID-19 vaccine is 90% effective. 90% effective. Now, there's quite a bit to unpack on this. Obviously, it's not out. You're trying to get a fast track on this. This would be mind-blowingly fast if we were able to get a vaccine this quickly. And so good, good for Pfizer and good for these other companies that are racing to figure this out. So what they did, this Pfizer test is actually pretty impressive. 44,000 people were in this test. They gave some people a saline shot, and the other people they got a coronavirus shot. And what they found is that only about 96 cases popped up after they received the shot. So at 90% effectiveness. Now, this has not been peer reviewed. This has not been looked at fully to be confirmed yet. They still have to go through that process. But this is making Wall Street happy. Wall Street exploded this morning on this news, up 500 already as a result of this news from Pfizer. So this is the question, though. How quickly can we get this thing in moving through the federal government after these trials are completed? Will it be safe? How quickly can we dispense with this virus or vaccine? We're entering the darkest period right now for COVID in our country's history. Through all of this, 123,000 cases in one day, breaking new records where experts believe we could hit upwards of 200,000 cases in a day. Troubling, though it is, we are learning that the administration, the Trump administration, has basically been playing golf with their task force. So we've learned now from reporting from the White House that Vice President Pence, he's in charge of that task force. They have not met in weeks. This has been confirmed. The coronavirus task force that's currently serving Mike Pence, the head of that, has not met for weeks because they've been campaigning for re-election. Wrap your head around that. As these cases are exploding, they haven't had a meeting. Contrast that with what's happening on the Biden front. And right now, Vice President Biden, President-elect, I got to get this through my head. It's so hard to remember this. I even heard people slipping up and calling him president already. He's president-elect. Although I guess not technically until he's officially certified, but I guess in the mainstream media eyes, he's the president-elect. He's been having multiple task force meetings and already setting up his coronavirus task force, holding meetings and talking strategy. And their task force says, look, we understand that we don't have two presidents in the United States at any one time, but we're trying to take action and work as quickly as we can to get this set up because we know this is going to be the biggest thing we will face in the early part of our presidency. One big piece of this, though, is getting access to these government agencies so that they can start to get the information and funds in place for this transition. Now, this is incredibly important because after 9/11, do you remember what one of the big critiques was and one of the major reasons why we were caught flat-footed on 9/11? Yeah, it's because the transition from Bill Clinton to George W. Bush was slow. So slow, in fact, that George W. Bush managed to not have enough people in place at these different agencies. It was like a real slow rollout and filling these different positions because of the huge delay between the Clinton administration and the Bush administration. There was a lot of animosity at the way that transition of power happened. So it was enacted as a law that the General Services Administration has to basically move that timeline up to almost right after the election. The GSA, the General Services Administration, has to sign off on this. They basically have to sign off on the election. And it's the next step for the head of the General Services Administration to rule that the election results are final. Okay. And he has to do this. And then he would enable the transition team to expand its work and gain access to government funds to start building their task force, doing what they need to do. But there's a problem. Because President Trump is in charge. And Biden officials are prepared for legal action right now if that administrator, her name is Emily Murphy, a Trump political appointee, delays that decision. So she right now is not moving on this. Do you know what happened after George W. Bush left office? He vowed that it would be a transition of peaceful power over to the Obamas so that we didn't have another 9/11 or another problem like that, a national catastrophe where this administration was caught flat-footed. Because it's not about politics, it's about all of us, right? I know maybe President Trump doesn't see it that way because everything's always all about him. So George W. Bush within the same afternoon after President Obama had won, that letter was signed and authorized so that the Obama administration could come in and start work and get these agencies set up and the funds in place to start that transition. That hasn't happened yet under the Trump administration. We have a pandemic. Let's just play politics right now, you morons. One question, though, I have is whether or not we will actually see something President Trump said come true. Now, President Trump, a few weeks ago, made a prediction. Do you remember this prediction? His prediction was that we wouldn't see the mainstream media covering the coronavirus after the election. That if, Biden wins, that's going to go away. Mainstream media is not going to talk about it. Well, if this weekend was any indication of that, he was right. How many of you watched any kind of mainstream media news this weekend at all? Just flipping around, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, etc. Very little coverage of coronavirus. Now, I get that the discussion of the moment is this weekend, of course. It's now President-elect Biden. So that, of course, is the coverage. And we want to talk about that there's dogs coming into the White House now. Yes, it's a cute story. But my wife at one point said, I haven't seen them talk about the 120,000 people that have just now been just now got coronavirus. Like, where's the coverage of this? They brought out like Joe Lieberman, Al Gore. They brought out all these old people from back in the 2000s when everything was contentious. Like, let's just talk about that all weekend. But let's not have any discussion about coronavirus. So the question I have is, will these mainstream media outlets, these liberal media outlets, actually cover the virus? Or will it mysteriously just go away from their airways? Because now Biden's in charge. And we don't want to talk about that. So again, watch what they do, not what they say. So again, what we want to focus on is the mainstream media. It comes down to the numbers. If you see them covering it, if they've got, Dr. Fauci on there talking about how bad it is, if they've got these, other members of the Biden administration talking about how bad it is, good for them. But if it's suddenly swept under the rug, this is where we need to hold our mainstream media outlets account for their hypocrisy. Because now it's getting worse. And I can't imagine that in January it's suddenly going to be better once Biden comes in on his white horse. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. So I'd love to hear your comments below. Smash that like button and subscribe to our channel if you're new here. We're going to talk about the stimulus in a moment. It's easy to subscribe.